Our prophetic reflective news broadcast concluded recently, which was geared to awaken the body of Messiah to news events that were shaping our world in recent years, with exhortation from the Scriptures on how we should live out our walk in a Torah community. After prayer and sharing together to discuss new directions that could have positive impact on lifestyle changes in our own community, it was decided to provide more practical content to include workshops on areas we feel will help those viewing these broadcasts to develop skill sets, practical knowledge, and understanding to make those lifestyle changes we all would like to make, but given the time constraints of jobs, family, and a rapidly changing world, feel a bit overwhelmed wondering where to begin. Several of us in our community are beginning gardens and relocating from places near and far to be closer to each other geographically, allowing us to be available to help others with home projects ranging from home remodeling to gardening and lawn care, helping our elderly with taxi services or other needs, providing meals for the sick, or mothers and families with newborn babies to adjust to their new routines. Given the material we covered in our prophetic reflective news broadcast, with all the headlines covering global food shortages and impending famine, with inflation costing families more and more with less to show for it, if it's even going to be available at all, we're now going to be redirecting our energies to this new direction of lifestyle change. This includes practical gardening skills with the seasonal changes of any given year that we'll need to plan and manage, from colder winter weather to hotter summer climates, which will all fall under the heading of this new series of broadcasts called Harvest to Harvest. So whether you're an experienced gardener or you're new to gardening, we're hoping to create a community of families working together to help one another, sharing their wisdom, experience, and skill sets to enrich all who have a desire to make the necessary changes, to compensate for the challenges we'll all be dealing with that are already in motion. On that note, I'll be turning this over to Arnold Threet, an experienced farmer who will give you some background on his family and farming, and I'll share my own story, which has been living in cities all my life until recently, but having a desire to learn from scratch what we need to do to have year-round food on our table, year in and year out. Arnold, take it away.
Thanks, Keith. As we endeavor to make the necessary changes in our lifestyle to be able to support ourselves, we find ourselves having to look back to find where we need to go in the future. So in doing that, I'd like to share a little bit of my life and where I came from and what would qualify us to be sharing these things with you. I was born in 1949, right after the Second World War, and in 1955, at the age of 6, I'm standing out with my dad and grandfather. The whole family's there, and we're talking over farming, because that was always an exciting time in my family, was to smell the fresh plowed ground and the excitement of planting something new and watching it grow all summer and then harvest it in the fall. So in that conversation, my grandfather just announces that we were not going to be planting certain acres in his part of the farm because the government was going to pay them not to farm, which absolutely made no sense to me at that time. But over the years, we can see how big government has taken over farming, and now it's big farms and very few smaller farms. So is it any wonder that we have lost our connection to the dirt to which we came from, to which our Creator King often refers to in his teachings and instructions in his word, and we do not understand because we're not connected to the agrarian lifestyle. So part of our desire to bring you this Harvest to Harvest programming is to take us back in time and bring up that lifestyle again. Now, as a child, everything that we ate came from our farm, one way or the other. all the things that we did not have, like sugar maybe, or flour, or those type things, we would barter with the guy who had the little rotating store on a school bus, and we called him the peddler. And when the peddler came through, he would stop at each resident and ask if we needed anything that month. And we would go, the parents would go on board. They wouldn't let us children in there because we'd probably be eating all the candy. They would go through and barter with the man, take something off of what we have grown, be it milk or butter or chicken or egg or whatever, to get what they needed, which would be those things that we could not provide for ourselves. But we were deeply rooted in an agrarian lifestyle, which had all kinds of benefits. Even now, you see in the workforce today, those men who came off of the farm had a total understanding, for the most part, about authority and the things that took place in life. That's the reason the farmers made the best soldiers in the military, because they could follow instructions they'd been trained to on the farm. But as we look back at this lifestyle, and we'll be covering these things in the near future, the harvest to harvest was actually a good biblical way of doing things. And my wife saw that. She's actually says, I'm not saving up food for the apocalypse, the end time events that are taking place. I just think that we need to be from harvest to harvest. So that's what generated this title of where we're looking at. And it's to recapture a lifestyle perhaps that's foreign to a whole lot of us, but is very necessary for us in this generation, because those things that we are able to go purchase in this drive-through lifestyle may soon not be available to us. And I say the drive-through lifestyle because you can go get any meal you want to through a drive-through fast food restaurant, where it's Mexican, Chinese, American, whatever. But you can also do the same thing in any major big box store. You can call them up and order what you want, and you can have it delivered to your home or pick it up on the premises without ever getting out of your car. So that's what my definition of a drive-through lifestyle is, and I just asked you to compare that note. But in the harvest to harvest, what we're trying to do is recapture a biblical way and a biblical lifestyle that's been forgotten. So as we refocus and look at things differently, we see a garden lifestyle, if you will, where everything that's taking place is taking place in the confines of the garden language that our Creator had in the very beginning. So we came from the garden and we're going back to the garden, so why not practice those garden lifestyles? And that's what Harvest to Harvest is all about. So you teach and train your children all about the garden lifestyle, which doesn't just entail growing food. It's going to cover a whole lot of stuff, and we're going to talk about those things in just a few minutes, but I'm going to turn this back over to Keith and let him tell you about his lifestyle.
Thanks, Arnold. Unlike Arnold, I grew up in cities, and other than some hobby gardens I did as a boy and a short span in my 20s, I've never grown a garden to have year-round produce for our kitchen table. Where Arnold has been retired from a regular employer for some years now, and he's hardly laying around in a hammock or spending his days on a golf course, but it gives him the freedom in his schedule to work his own garden and lending a hand to others in our community with projects they need help with on their properties. My wife's and my day job limits the amount of time I can spend working on a garden, yet we both recognize this as a top priority for our household, given the times in which we live. Several years ago, I met with one of the largest growers of organic produce in the country, and after visits to their farm, we had a desire to grow our own produce using organic processes in favor of petrochemical fertilizers. We also visited organic growers in the Pacific Northwest who hosted workshops using the Back to Eden method of gardening, sometimes referred to as permaculture or lasagna gardening. I became more drawn to starting our own gardens as the produce picked vine-ripe smelled and tasted so much better than store-bought, not to mention the savings to our grocery budget given what we spend on produce each week. So we both had the desire to grow our own food, but making the time for all that's involved was a challenge for us. We were nomads during these former years as we sought out Torah communities in the Pacific Northwest that were grounded with a heart to establish a community of like-minded believers who could come together in a collaborative mindset to have our gifts and skill sets complement each other in a supportive community. After some years of travel and fruitless search, our prayers were answered as the Holy Spirit directed us to the Gulf Coast to work as an independent contractor, and it was here that we discovered a Torah community in a small town in South Mississippi. In the past year, we purchased a home in our local community, and Sunday is the only day we have available to work on our property. So we can identify with all those who don't have the time to spend on their properties or gardening endeavors as others, yet were committed to the process of jumping into the deep end and acquiring the skill sets necessary to have a year-round garden, giving us rich produce that we can freeze, can, or dehydrate, or repurpose in some other way. With that, I'll let Arnold close with our first project that we'll be working on in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Keith. Just to give you a little bit of a perspective about what we're going to be covering, our first segment will be discussing raised bed garden, what you can do, the size, the different ways. We'll also be looking at patio type gardening where you can do a couple of plants in a big pot or a small pot, regardless of how you look at things. Larger family gardens and some big open field type planting that we will cover, not in great detail because most people will not be doing that. So we want to concentrate on the things that most people in this community of believers will be dealing with. But in this harvest to harvest type garden, some of the things that we will be covering in addition to those things will be medical issues, how to have water when you have no electricity, how to generate your own electricity perhaps. So the subject matter is endless of what we can do to help each other in a time of crisis, which we're looking at as the prophetic reflective news series that we all participated in, laid out so perfectly clear that we might need to look at a lifestyle change. So we want to do that. And one of the lifestyle changes would be the way we look at farming altogether, that it is a necessary element in our society. And as Keith has already mentioned, the permaculture type way of farming is a good way to do it. And the West Coast type farming that he refers to was back to Eden farming, where a man took decomposed wood chips and put them on his garden and around his fruit trees, and found out by the direction of the Father that that was a great way of farming because that's the way he farms, the Creator. So he says, don't fret. This is easy. Look at what I do. So that's what we would like to share with you, is the different types of farming, and permacultural is one of those where you take rotted organic matter, which is returned to dirt, you put it where you're going to be farming, and that's what you farm in. So you become dirt farmers, and this is what it's all about. And if you don't have good dirt, you're not going to have good produce. So our goal, number one, is to share how to have good dirt and then what to plant in it. It would be things that you would want to eat. You wouldn't want to store up a bunch of food that you didn't normally would eat, so you want to find out what your family likes to eat, find out how to plant it, how to maintain it, and we're going to try to give you the encouragement to do those things. So there are different ways of growing, and that's what we want to cover. So the elements involved in this whole lifestyle would be water, soil, fertilizers, times to plant, what grows where you live. Now we live in the deep south, so a lot of things that we can grow here you wouldn't be able to grow in a colder climate up north, at least for very long, because here we can actually plant something year-round and harvest something year-round. May have to take a few precautions because of frost, but as is the nature here, we're in group 8 and 9, which is down this coast. We can grow almost what they can grow in lower Texas and in Florida. Citrus being the exception, when we can grow a little bit of that. So where you live may be a little different, but I think the principles that we're going to be sharing could be a benefit to any Torah-keeping community. And I think the key here would be be in a right relationship with everybody, so that what you are good in, somebody else may be short in, but he may be good in what you're short in. And you're going to be working together, and it would be like it was as Father intended. So we came from a garden, we're going back to a garden, so let's practice a garden. And Keith, I'm glad I'm in this garden concept with you. So until next time, shalom.
Shalom.